Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Meet Your Mentor podcast. The Meet Your Mentor podcast is a podcast where I, the host, will interview a mentor to learn a little bit about their life and journeys, their job, what it means to be a mentor, and so much more. Now, my name is Elise, and as I said earlier, I am the host of Meet Your Mentor. I'm a junior in high school, and I am an intern here at the Mentor Project, which has given me the opportunity to talk to so many incredible people. Now, before I get started and introduce you all to today's mentor, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of you listening in and all of the sponsors. You guys keep this podcast running, and we really appreciate what you do. Now, I am so excited for this interview, and I think all of you will really enjoy it, because today I get to interview Dr. Ruth Gotian. Ruth is the Chief Learning Officer and Assistant Professor of Education in Anesthesiology and former Assistant Dean of Mentoring and Executive Director of the Mentoring Academy at Weill Cornell Medicine. She has been hailed by the journal Nature and Columbia University as an expert in mentorship and leadership development. In 2021, she was selected as one of 30 people worldwide to be named the Thinkers 50 Radar List, dubbed the Oscars of Management Thinking, and by August was shortlisted as the top 8 emerging management thinkers in the world. She is also a semi-finalist for the Forbes 50 over 50 list. In addition to publishing academic journals, she is a contributor to Forbes and Psychology Today, where she writes about optimizing success. Her research is about the mindset and skill set of peak performers, including Nobel laureates, astronauts, and Olympic champions. Her forthcoming book, The Success Factor, will be out in January. Now, Ruth, I cannot wait to learn more about you, so just go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
I am so excited, and I have to say, being interviewed by somebody in high school, this is just really making my day, because a lot of what we do in the Mentor Project is really to mentor people who are right at the path of their life onto greatness. So this is really a privilege that we get to chat today. And I am based in hot and humid New York, and I am so excited that we get to chat today.
Yeah, me too. I'm really glad that we were, able to finally find a time that would work for both of us, and that, we could just do this today. So
let's roll.
All right. Well, why don't you just aside from that intro I read, tell us a little bit about yourself. And perhaps one of my main questions that I have for you is, how did you realize that mentoring was something that you wanted to focus on rather than like a hobby or kind of something that just came along with like jobs that you were in?
Love that. So my background, my bachelor's and master's are actually in business. And for a while, I worked in finance and international banking and realized after a couple of years that I wasn't loving it. I was good at it, but I wasn't loving it. And I switched back into working in higher ed because I loved working with students, but I wanted to work with different types of students. I have always worked on the undergrad level, and then I switched to move to the medical and graduate school level, and now I work in faculty. So now I'm in academic medicine, but I've been in higher ed for over 30 years. And I love it because things are always change and you get to do so many different things. No 2 days are ever the same. And along that path, I had a family at the age of 43. I decided to go back to school while working full time. And I got my doctorate in adult learning and leadership. So I figure out how people like you and I learn, which is very different from the K through 12 model. Mm-hmm. And why certain people ascend to leadership and do it well and others don't. And my research has been about extreme high achievers, such as the astronauts and Nobel Prize winners and the Olympians. So I've interviewed a lot of extreme high achievers to figure out what has made them so successful. I reversed engineered that path, and then I created the blueprint for how anybody who wants to be more successful can be. Mm-hmm. And that's what my book, The Success Factor, is all about.
Wow, that's very interesting. So can you maybe give us a little bit of like a glimpse into what that kind of is or what you discovered?
Sure. So there are 4 main elements that all extreme high achievers do. The first one is they love what they do. They would do it for free if they could. This is why they were put on this earth. And in academic terms, we call that intrinsic motivation. I mean, you're doing it from within. You're not doing it for the gold medal, the Nobel Prize, the diploma, the award. You're doing it because you have this burning question, this burning desire in you that you need to do it. So when you're able to fuel things by what we call intrinsic motivation, that pushes you through the hard times, right? Because there's always hard times, but you want to answer that question, as opposed to people who do it for extrinsic motivation, which are the diplomas and the prizes. Those are the people who usually burn out or fail out, and the first hint of trouble, they give up. So that's the first one. The second one is they have this level of perseverance where they are going to stick with the problem and get it solved no matter what, which means that they look at challenges very differently. So instead of saying, will I overcome this challenge? For them, it's high achievers. It's never a question of if, it's a question of how. They think about, what is the strategy I haven't yet considered in order to solve this problem? So they shift their entire mindset from if to how, which makes solving problems that much better, and they're much more efficient at it. It also means they don't drop their pen at 5 o'clock. They stick with the challenge until it's solved. The third one is they have a really strong foundation, which they're constantly reinforcing, and they never rest on their laurels. They're still doing the same things that they did early on in their career. So you would see any NBA stars doing the same types of warm-ups that you would see in any junior high gym. It hasn't changed. They have better equipment, they have better sneakers, they have, better coaches, but the base is still exactly the same. They're never doing it just for the prize. They don't give up on it. And if you ask any Olympian, they'll say that everything they've learned about their sport, they've learned in the first 6 months, and they spent the rest of their career just fine-tuning it. And then finally, the last one is that all extreme high achievers are constantly learning. So we all hear about the billionaires, right? The Bill Gates, the Warren Buffetts, the Mark Cubans, who read for 3, 5, 8 hours a day. And that might work for them. But what's interesting is not that they're reading that has made them billionaires. It's the fact that they're open to new knowledge. So reading works for them, but you could read shorter things such as blogs or articles. You can listen to podcasts such as this one. You can watch YouTube videos. You can talk to people. And all of the extreme high achievers had mentors, and not just one mentor, they had a team of mentors. So I have been very fortunate that I was able to see that these 4 things are so common among all extreme high achievers. And it doesn't matter if you're an astronaut or an Olympian, it's the same thing. So that's when I then started teaching that to other people. Now, why did I consider mentorship to be so important? I've been blessed with really, really good mentors my entire life. And I looked back at my personal statement when I was applying to doctoral programs, and I actually wrote down that I think I want to study mentorship, because I had some sort of inkling that that was part of it. And lo and behold, all extreme high achievers have mentors. Why? Because they realize they don't know everything, and they can benefit by learning from other people and learning and hearing about new perspectives. And by being open to new knowledge, you can open an entire world, right? And learn from other people, be introduced to new people, hear about new things. So being able to do that is always so critical.
That's all very interesting. Now that you mention these things, I feel like obviously it was extremely difficult for you to identify those 4, and that was the most common. But I mean, it makes a lot of sense, at least in my head, that that would lead to such a successful person. And I especially thought it was really interesting what you mentioned about intrinsic motivation, I believe, and just how I feel like even some of my friends around me now, I'm not saying they're going to be the most successful people, but I just can see that in them. And especially my sister has been a dedicated ballerina for the past 14 years. She started when she was 2.
Wow.
So 16 years. She just it's nonstop, and it's just being able to have that. It's just so incredible. And I don't know, that's kind of where I was going.
Even in her free time, she's probably doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes a lot of sense that, that's the successful people. They're not doing it for others. They're doing it for themselves,
That's right.
Yeah. And so I also, I'm sure it was very difficult for you to get started on this and kind of get the ball rolling a little bit. And so I was wondering, when you first had this idea, now I'm not sure, when it started for you or when you wanted to start doing this, but what was some of the potentially best advice or best things that you learned in this process that you feel that others should know when trying to attempt something similar?
So it's interesting, when I was later in life when I decided to go back to school, and I was deciding what project to do. And one of my mentors said something to me. He said, do something important, not just interesting. Because if it's interesting, it's a hobby. But if it's important, it will have impact. And, he said that to me years and years and years and years ago. And that really just got embedded in my brain, that now I think about it. And if I'm going to do something, you might as well do something that's going to have impact and be important. And it's interesting, when I asked Dr. Tony Fauci how he picked what projects to work on, right? Because now we're in the middle of a pandemic, but in the times we're not in the middle of a pandemic, right? How do you pick what projects you're working on?
Yeah.
He said, you pick what's important, not just interesting, because important will have a ripple effect and it'll have an impact. And, now I heard this from two people. So that's when I realized that this really has legs. And then I realized that people were always focused on how to get people to do more and achieve more, but they were always, in the workplace, we're always focused on baseline, right? This is the average. This is the baseline. And if you fall below the baseline, there's all sorts of programs to bring you up to baseline. There's milestones for you to hit. There's corrective action plans. But nobody was focused on those who are doing more, right? Those peak performers. And they were sort of being ignored. And I said, but what if we focused on them? Because their work can more than cover for anyone who leaves the workplace because of poor performance. And then it just snowballed. So I actually started it with my doctoral research on physician scientists. And then I was curious if that work on physician scientists, and what I found is the same in other fields. And then I started interviewing the astronauts and the Olympians and the CEOs. And that's when I realized, ding, 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 it's the same four things.
Yeah.
Which means the astronaut is like the Olympian. And if that's the case, that means anybody can learn how to do this. Success is a learnable skill. And now we just need to teach people who are interested in being more successful how to do it. So when people are ready, the teacher will appear.
Yeah. That's amazing. I imagine that all those interviews that you did as well were very eye-opening and very interesting, because you got to interview so many amazing people.
I really did. I had the really great privilege of interviewing people from different fields. So, and I was really curious. I really wanted to do that because I wanted to see if those same four elements I found were the same in different fields. So we have the Nobel laureates such as Drs. Mike Brown and Bob Lefkowitz, who are featured in the book, but there's also Olympians such as Paulo Anton Ono, who is the most decorated Winter Olympian, and a Dancing with the Star Mirror Ball champion. And we also have Maxine Clark, the CEO of Build-A-Bear Workshop. And we have Dr. Peg Whitson, who is the chief astronaut and spent more days in space than any American astronaut. So we have a lot of incredible people whose stories are shared in order to underscore these four elements. Because it doesn't matter if you're an NBA champion or a Nobel Prize winner or astronaut or CEO, it's the same thing. It's the same four elements. And the key is you have to do all of them together.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very cool. I am very now eager to look more into your book, because it sounds like something that would be very, very interesting. And also, can you talk a little bit about like what the process of writing a book was like and how you kind of put, I guess, like your hypothesis and your thesis and all of that like into book format and what that was like?
So this book, it's actually my second book. My first book is more of a textbook on medical education for a very, very niche audience. But this one is really more for a lay audience. So changing my writing from academic writing to writing for a lay audience was the first switch I had to do. And writing a book is really about writing it in parts, right? Part 1, part 2, part 3, and what are the chapters in each one and the overarching lesson. So coming to terms with that and sketching that out was the first big piece. So the first part I wrote about what is success and why is that important? And the second part of the book is talking about the 4 elements of success. And then the third part is how you can become successful. So it's great that I talk about intrinsic motivation, but if I don't tell you how to find it and how to apply it, it's just another theoretical book. So it was very important to me to have applications that the reader could just implement immediately. And I work full time and I have a family. So this book was written on nights and weekends for hours and hours and hours and hours. Thankfully, because I write a lot for Forbes and Psychology Today and academic work, I'm used to writing quickly once the ideas come in my head. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what I want to write. And then once I got it, I couldn't type fast enough. And I got a very strict timeline and what I had to turn in every few weeks. And it was important to me to beat every single timeline because I'm that kind of person. You give me a challenge, I got to beat it. So I had to beat it. I don't care if I beat it by one day, I had to beat that timeline.
Yeah, this is largely different from what you're talking about for like a plethora of reasons. But actually last summer at kind of when the pandemic was just getting started, me and my friend like wrote like a book. And it was more of like a fiction fantasy kind of book. So obviously very different genres here that we're dealing with, but I definitely know what you're saying. Like we probably spent 2.5 months like outlining and planning and hashing everything out. And then we spent like 1 month writing and then it was like done, so I definitely know what you mean by that.
But I spent more than a month. I had to write, I guess I started writing in November and I submitted around July 1, the final with all the editing. So it takes a lot of,
definitely
a lot of time. It's around 70,000 words. So it takes time, but I teach this, I give workshops on it. I keynote about it. So the content I was so familiar with. I was just trying to give it in a voice where people would want to hear. But I'm excited to hear about your book. Is it on Amazon yet?
No, we have not taken that step or whatever. In fact, like once we were like finished with what we had outlined, which we made the mistake of like having an outline for like at least 4 books, and we're never going to get there. We're done. But, it was very fun while it lasted, and it was a really good experience, and I'm glad I had it.
Put that book on Amazon. Let people read it.
No, we would love to, but we have not gone back. I haven't looked at that in a year, but it's okay. You never know. Maybe one day I'll get back around to it, right?
There you go.
You never know.
There you go.
So I want to like shift gears a little bit. And obviously for you, mentoring is something that is a large part of your professional life as well as your personal life. But can you talk about just like either, some of the mentors that you've had and how they impacted you and kind of how you're passing that on to the newer people that you're mentoring as well?
So I have a lot of mentors. I have a team of mentors. But there's a few in particular. There's a few senior mentors There's Dr. Bert Shapiro, who worked at the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, for decades. And he's the one who told me, do something important, not just interesting.
Yeah.
And he always had this big picture view, which was great because that's what I needed. And then Dr. Marie Volpe, she started out as my doctoral dissertation advisor, but has been a fabulous mentor. She has made me the writer I am today. And in fact, my book proposal, I sent to her. I sent to her to review. I still am looking and seeking her input and her perspective. And then I have a lot of peer mentors as well, people who are at my level that I like to bounce ideas off of to get additional perspective. And then I have my students, people who I mentor, I think they mentor me as well. So it really is, it's a team of mentors, and it's bi-directional, which I think is great.
Yeah, I've definitely heard a few mentors on this podcast, and they're like, it goes both ways, you know, just because somebody's younger than me does not mean I can't learn from them at all.
No, nope.
Yeah. So I've definitely, that's kind of a common thing, but you know, the more people have talked about it, the more I'm like, oh, I never really would have considered that. Obviously, like, you can learn new things at any age, but I never really consciously thought that like mentoring goes both ways, you know?
It's interesting. So I wrote early in the pandemic a Nature article, an article in Nature about mentoring during the pandemic. And I wanted to tell scientists how they should mentor their trainees at this point. And I really wanted to make sure I had the voice of the trainee in there, that I was hitting what they need, because I knew that a lot of mentors are going to read this. So I actually reached out to one of my former mentees, who is a prolific writer. And I said, am I missing anything? Did I really capture what you guys need? And I needed to get that perspective. And because, you know, what happened is you have tunnel vision and you don't know what other people are thinking about. You're so inside the jar, you can't read the label. So it was important to really get that perspective. And I learned a lot from those conversations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Even whether it's writing essays or the book experience that I had, like, I definitely couldn't have gone one day writing and then the next like fully editing it, because I just couldn't take myself out of it and really read, you know?
That's
so
right.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you mean by that. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So I only have like a couple things left that I want to talk about, but the first one is, if there's anybody who's listening or watching right now and wants to either get in contact with you or just to learn more about you and like your books, what would be the best way for them to do that? Like website, email, etc.
So my website is just my name. It's ruthgotian.com, RuthGotian, and there's a contact page there. There's also a bunch of resources there about passion audits and mentoring teams that you could just download for free. So go ahead and do that. And all the social media is just my name, Ruth Gotian.
Okay, great. That's perfect. And then to make things a little bit easier, I will just go ahead and put that link into like the description of the podcast to make it easier for anyone who's listening right now. Which this leads me to my last thing. So I've been doing this podcast for a while, and you know, if there are any listeners who have been here from the beginning, I'm sure you know that. And I recently wanted to like change things up a little bit, because I feel like it's very important not to to know your mentor as a person and not just their career. And so I have a couple like more personal rapid fire questions, you could almost say, that I just want to ask you, if that's okay with you.
Awesome.
All right. My first one is, what's your favorite book?
Oh my God. I read 70 to 100 books a year. I don't have one.
Okay. Well, one that stands out to you then.
Okay. I'm going to give you a few.
Okay.
A Higher Standard by General Ann Dunwoody, and From Willard Straight to Wall Street by Thomas W. Jones. Those are two autobiographies, actually.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. That's cool. My second question is, do you play any instruments, or did you used to?
I used to play the piano and sing.
Very cool. I played the piano for a while, and at the moment I actually play the harp. So.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a big instrument.
It is very large, very hard to move, but it's okay.
Yes.
Third question is, how do you spend your time off? apparently when you're not writing books?
I love to read books. I love reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I say reading that also includes listening. So I listen to books on Audible
Mm-hmm.
when I'm driving, and I love to read books both on Kindle and hard copy.
Yeah. I definitely like to read as well, so that's very cool. And I have been meaning to get into a little bit more like autobiographies and things like that. So I definitely will look at the books that you mentioned.
Yeah, those are really great ones.
Yeah. My last question for you is, what is your favorite movie franchise?
Movie franchise.
You can pick a movie if you want. I just figured franchise might.
I don't know that I have a franchise, but I have favorite actors. So anything with Tom Hanks and anything with Julia Roberts.
Yes, they're both great. They're amazing. Good actors.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was pretty much those were the questions. I just thought that they would be interesting to know the answers to. So yeah. So I mean, it seems we're just about out of time, but just thank you so much, Ruth. All of that information that you shared was very interesting, and I'm so glad I got the chance to learn more about you.
Likewise.
Yeah, for everyone who's watching or listening in right now, I hope you enjoyed the podcast and maybe you're able to take something away from it. And if you want to learn more about Ruth, just feel free to go to the places she mentioned, which, as I said before, will be in the description of the podcast. And if you want to learn more about the Mentor Project itself, feel free to go to www.mentorproject.org. I hope to see all of you back here for the next episode. And yeah, thank you guys so much. Thanks again, Ruth. This was amazing.
And one other thing I want to say, we have through the Mentor Project, I host every Monday night. We're off now for the summer. We'll kick it up again in October. We have our show, Optimizing Your Success, where we bring in these successful people and they talk about their journeys. So we're going to have astronauts. We've had astronauts also. We've had a ton of Olympians and Paralympians. We have a Nobel Prize winner slated for October. So go check it out, Optimizing Your Success on the Mentor Project.
Yes, definitely. If you found like anything in this podcast interesting, definitely a great place to expand on that. So yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that was about all I had, but thanks again, Ruth. This was really amazing, and I hope everybody has a great week. So thank you guys. Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.